So Mark, why do business owners typically decide to sell?
I guess there's a variety of reasons. Retirement is obviously a big one. People get to an age where they're 60 plus and looking to do something different. We see businesses where they've reached a certain level, they need a lot more investment. The current owners haven't got access to those funds. We've seen that quite a lot. Or businesses just think, I fancy a change. I've been doing this for 25 years now and time to move on.
You tend to find it's personal factors or business factors or sometimes a combination of the two.
It's often a combination of the two.
Usually comes together.
So we've reached a decision to sell the business. How does that process work?
Well, like all these things, typically you find it broken down into different stages. The first stage is the one that is always most neglected, which is preparation. A lot of preparation required. Then we look to source buyers. Then there's a process of negotiation and back and forth, trying to shape what a deal might look like. Then it'll go into a process of due diligence, which is a whole exercise of its own. And then the bit at the end is expressing all of that in robust legal language. So the contracts and the documents that essentially consummate the deal.
So is there a good time to engage if you're looking to sell?
Well, the preparation bit can never start early enough. It's one of those things that people should always be thinking about. And it's one of those things, for understandable reasons that business owners do neglect. And we can understand why, because it's not a thing they do every day. It might be something they do, once, maybe twice in a lifetime.
Typically, how long can this process take?
If a business has been prepared for the sale, they've thought about it, they've taken it seriously, minimum 6 months. But realistically, we might find 12 to 18 months. It depends on the case, it depends on the circumstances. What we're able to do is share our experiences from previous sales to give our clients a realistic idea of how long the process will take.
End of the process, our client gets a big check. How do we maximise the value, as I always say, written on the bottom of the check, but equally for our clients reduce or mitigate some of the risks?
It's always the question that a client will start with, isn't it? What do you think this is worth? And what I quite like to do is to go back to some of the basic foundations of business value and try to get our clients in the mindset, not from their own perspective, but from the perspective of somebody else looking at the business. And I think we can all understand that any investor, and that's what a business sale is, somebody making an investment, any investor is looking for a return on their investment. So we need to be thinking about those things that make those returns look attractive in terms of quantum, but also attractive in terms of risk. So the lower risk, the better, and the higher the cash returns of a business, the better. And that's some of the stuff that we can get into when we talk about preparing for a business sale.
And the earnings is interesting because obviously we work with lots of family-owned businesses. Lots of those family-owned businesses might employ members of the family, might have season tickets for the local football team, might do all sorts of sponsorship where there is no return on those costs. And actually we have the discussion with our clients. So actually, if you carry on incurring those costs, they are impacting on your profits and they will ultimately reduce the sales price.
That's exactly right. And it's getting the business owner outside of the mindset that perhaps has served them well for many, many years running their business into the mindset of that buyer, that investor looking at the business as something that's going to return a flow of income, because that is the basis of value.
And if you are selling, why is it so important to engage professionals to assist you?
Well, I think we've seen a lot of this stuff before, haven't we? So we know and have seen lots of businesses in the past, and we're able to quite quickly assess where those risks are, where those drivers of value are, and we're able to guide and coach clients through that process. And we also have experience from the other side, working for buyers. What are the sort of things that they will look at when clearly they're looking for the lowest possible price, the seller's looking for the highest possible price? Where are the potential pitfalls and holes that can be dealt with before a sales process is undertaken?
So we've talked about value a little bit, but someone knocks on your door, offers you £5 million for your business. How does that £5 million come across? Because I'm guessing you're going to say it's not £5 million on completion in a bank.
Yeah, a headline price might be £5 million, but we need to look at how that price is structured as well. And there are loads of devices in practice. It might be deferral of payments, so payments spread over a number of years. It might be that there are conditions attached to payments, so performance conditions. The business has to achieve profits of X or Y, or it could even be individual specific. So it could be some sort of mechanism to tie particular individuals in the business for a period post-completion of the deal. So we really have to be careful and cautious about just looking at that headline number, because often the devil is in the detail, and an offer that maybe is less than your 5 million could in fact be a better result for the seller when all of those other factors are taken into account. And that's something we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about.
And I guess on that as well, you may be in a position whereby you've got two very comparable offers, one slightly less than the other, but our client, the seller, says, well, actually, I would rather sell my business to that gentleman rather than that one.
Exactly right.
Again, part of legacy and all of those issues we spoke about.
Yeah, that's quite right. And often a seller is quite keen to understand what the intentions of a buyer might be in the future for all of those reasons. And back to a point that you made earlier, once the deal is done, they're effectively selling control. So legally they have no standing. So it really then becomes an instinctive judgment as much as a numerical assessment.
Yeah.
What about employees, Mark? How do you find, in your experience, employees are affected by a process like this?
I think in the majority of cases, employees are always nervous because generally people don't like change. In most of the transactions I've dealt with, it's actually turned into a positive, because what you have to recall, you've got an owner that is tired, hasn't maybe invested in the business for some time. A new owner comes in with new ideas. So I think if they approach it with the right attitude and a positive attitude, in the main it works out quite well. And ordinarily the sellers will still have some involvement in the business going forward, because what the buyer wants is that continuity. They don't want to pull the shutters down one day, put new signage up the next day. They want to show that it's business as usual, but with new owners type story.
And that continuing involvement of the seller in the business. So after a deal has happened, we might find the seller remains in the business. I mean, how do you see that work in practice?
It's a change. I think sometimes the sellers find it quite hard, but the key thing is, and I always tell this to clients, when you sign, what you're selling is control. So you have no control. But what normally happens is they've built up a degree of a relationship with the buyer during the process. It tends to work quite well, but the sellers have to realise they don't have control. And I think that's the bit some of them still find quite hard.
I think something that is often missed but is of fundamental importance, particularly in the own and managed business space, is the importance of emotions in a process like this as well, because quite often it will be a business that has been an owner's baby. Yeah. They might have been in that business for the entirety of their working life. They might have built it up from the very beginning with a £2,000 loan from the bank. And, they don't really know how they're going to respond to all of this stuff going on until they've gone through it. So having someone alongside them, I think, is really powerful. And I don't think that point's emphasised enough in our profession or in communications that you see.
And I think it's because the ones we saw last week, they were, with a smile on their face, they were saying, this last week has been absolutely hell, but you told me 18 months ago it would be. Yeah. And that is the reality. There are parts of the burden we can't take away. But as I've said earlier, nobody's going to give you £2, £3, £4 million without pushing you to the limit a little bit.
Exactly.